The wind pushed across the ferry deck in cold, restless waves, carrying the scent of salt and distant storms. The girl in the wheelchair sat near the railing, her blanket tucked around her legs, her breath forming a faint mist in the winter air. Christmas lights wrapped around the deck flickered softly, reflecting off her pale cheeks. She tilted her head back as far as she could, squinting at the sky, trying, failing, trying again. The railing blocked half her view, and the frustration tightened her fingers around the armrests. She wasn't crying, but the ache in her eyes said she had been close. The world above her felt so vast and unreachable, like everything she used to love had been placed just a little out of her grasp. The ocean hummed below, a lonely sound that made her chest feel even heavier. She whispered to herself, barely audible, "Just once. I want to see the whole sky." Footsteps approached, measured, confident, and out of place among the casual shuffling of tourists. She didn't look at him at first. She could feel the presence of someone tall, someone who didn't rush past but paused near her like he sensed something was wrong. When she finally turned her head, her breath caught. A man in a crisp black suit stood over her, the soft glow of the fairy lights outlining the sharp angles of his face. He looked powerful, composed, someone who belonged in tall buildings, not on chilly decks. For a second she almost stayed silent. He felt too important, too distant from her world. But the longing inside her rose up, trembling and bold. She lifted her chin just enough to meet his gaze. His eyes softened the moment they locked, with hers like he hadn't expected to see someone so fragile, so quietly desperate. Her voice broke the air between them, soft but steady. "Sir, can you lift me up to see the sky?" It felt like her heart was in her throat when she said it, like she had asked for something far too precious. The wind tugged at her hair as she waited. 1 second, 2. Her chest tightened, afraid she had overstepped. But then he inhaled sharply, as if her words had reached somewhere deep inside him. His expression shifted, confidence crumbling just enough to show something real. Without responding verbally, he knelt beside her wheelchair, lowering himself to her height. The cold metal of the deck echoed faintly as his knee touched it. Slowly, he looked up at the sky she had been aching to see, then back at her face, full of a softness she didn't expect from a man who looked like he carried the world on his shoulders. "I will," he murmured, almost like a promise to himself, and something inside her chest fluttered with a fragile spark of hope. He slipped one arm behind her back and the other beneath her knees, moving slowly, giving her time to breathe, to brace, to trust. His suit brushed against her blanket, warm where it touched her, cold where the winter air cut through. For the briefest second, she hesitated, her fingers curling into the fabric of her dress, her heartbeat fluttering too fast. But when she felt him steady himself and look at her for silent permission, she gave a small nod. That single nod carried every fear she'd tried to swallow all year. He lifted her gently, yet with a strength that made her feel weightless. Her body rose, the world tilting, the railing sinking below her line of sight. Instinctively, she gripped his lapel, her breath catching against his shoulder. He tightened his arms around her just enough to reassure her she wouldn't fall. Not even for a moment. The cold wind surged past them, tugging her hair back like invisible fingers. For the first time in months, she wasn't staring at obstacles, she was rising above them. When she reached the height where the sky opened fully, she let out a gasp so pure, so unrestrained, it made his chest tighten. The night stretched endlessly above them, painted in deep velvet blues. And then, like the universe had been waiting for her, a streak of white tore across the heavens, a shooting star, sharp and bright, carving a line of hope through the dark. She laughed soft at first, then trembling with emotion. Tears gathered at the corners of her eyes. Not from sadness, but from the shock of beauty, of finally seeing something she had thought she'd lost forever. Her fingers, still holding on to him, loosened slightly, not in fear but surrender to the moment. He watched her more than the sky, his breath slowing as he felt her joy ripple through his arms. It was strange, how someone so fragile could make him feel something fierce, protective and alive. The deck behind them fell quiet. Passengers paused mid-conversation, drawn by the sight of a girl lifted like a wish into the night, her laughter mingling with the soft hum of the sea. She leaned her forehead lightly against his collar for a second, overwhelmed, and whispered, "It's beautiful. I forgot how beautiful it could be." Her voice cracked and he swallowed hard, steadying her as if she were something precious he was afraid to let go of. In that suspended moment, with the star fading behind them, and the ocean stretching endlessly around them. He realized lifting her wasn't just an act of kindness. It felt like fate had placed her in his arms on purpose. When he eased her back toward the wheelchair, he moved slowly, almost reluctantly, as if lowering her meant letting go of something neither of them had words for yet. Her fingers stayed hooked in his coat for a moment longer than necessary, clinging to the warmth, the safety, the feeling of being held. When her wheels touched the deck again, her hand slipped away and she inhaled shakily, like she was returning from someplace far above the ocean and the cold. He stayed kneeling in front of her, his breath misting in the air. The garland lights reflected off his eyes, softening the sharpness in his face. She looked different now. Eyes shining, cheeks flushed, lips parted with an emotion she wasn't quite ready to confess. Something inside her chest tightened and warmed at the same time. She hadn't expected a stranger, a man like him, to feel this close, this human. "You okay?" he asked quietly, his voice a low rumble that steadied her nerves. She nodded, but her throat tightened too much to speak. For a moment he studied her face as if trying to memorize it. She felt the weight of it, the intensity, and it sent a small pulse of heat through her chest. Then her expression shifted, just a flicker, but he caught it. A sadness, a hesitation, something she tried to hide. She looked away, her gaze dropping to her hands, wringing them in her lap as though she needed something to anchor herself. "Thank you," she finally murmured, her voice soft but shaky. I didn't think I'd ever see anything beautiful from that angle again." The words hit him harder than he expected. His jaw tightened and he exhaled slowly. He hated the idea of her believing the sky wasn't meant for her anymore. "You deserve to," he said. It wasn't just kindness, it was conviction, and she felt it. Her breath caught. No one had said something like that to her in a long time. Maybe ever. But before she could respond, a sudden sharp tremor ran through the ferry. A deep metallic groan echoed beneath them. Her chair wobbled. She stiffened, panic flaring in her eyes. The wheels shifted just enough to roll an inch forward, toward the open deck and the railing. Her heart lurched. She grabbed at the armrests too late. He moved faster than thought. His hand snapped to the handles of her wheelchair, gripping them with a force that stopped the motion instantly. The metal rattled under his grasp. She froze, breath held, eyes wide, chest rising too fast. For 2 seconds, neither of them moved. The world was nothing but his. Hands locked on the chair, and her fear hanging between them. "I've got you," he said, his voice rougher now, protective in a way that felt almost dangerous. Her eyes filled instantly, not from the near fall, not entirely, but from how fiercely he meant it. The ferry steadied, but she didn't. Her pulse thundered in her ears, and she stared at him like he was the only solid thing left in the world. He slowly stepped around to face her again, breath uneven, shoulders tense. Night wind swept past them, carrying the faint glow of the fading star behind his silhouette. Her panic softened, replaced by something trembling and tender. She reached out, her fingers brushing the back of his hand, seeking reassurance. He didn't pull away. He let her touch linger, grounding them both in the aftermath of fear and the strange, growing connection neither had expected tonight. He steadied her chair with both hands, as if making absolutely sure it wouldn't move again, even though the ferry had already leveled out. His breath was uneven, harsher than before, like the split-second fear of losing. Her had shaken something loose inside him. When he finally stepped back around to face her, the glow from the deck lights caught the tension in his jaw, the way his shoulders were still braced for danger that had already passed. She wasn't trembling anymore, but her eyes were. The panic hadn't fully left her. It clung to her like the cold sea wind, mixing with the adrenaline that still pulsed under her skin. When her gaze met his, the world around them softened. Blurry figures of passengers, faint conversations, the hum of the ocean, all fading until only he remained in focus. There was something in the way he looked at her, something rawer and more protective than she expected from a man whose suit probably cost more than her monthly rent. Her hand lifted before she even decided to move it. Fingers brushed the back of his hand lightly, testing, asking, grounding. He didn't flinch or pull away. Instead, he turned his hand palm up, letting her fingertips settle against his skin like an invitation he hadn't known he needed to give. "I'm sorry," she whispered, though she wasn't sure what for. The scare, the request, the feelings she couldn't name. Her voice wavered and he shook his head immediately. "Don't apologize," he said softly. His eyes held a seriousness that made her heart throb unevenly. "You didn't do anything wrong." I just... He cut himself off, breath-catching, as if he'd almost revealed too much. His gaze drifted to the sea for a moment, trying to gather himself, then returned to her with a steadier intensity. The wind swept a loose strand of her hair across her face. He hesitated, then reached out gently and brushed it back, his fingers barely grazing her cheek. The touch was light, respectful, yet somehow more intimate than if he'd pulled her close. She froze, not from fear, but from the shock of how tender it felt. "I thought you were going to roll forward," he murmured, voice low, almost a confession. "For a second, I saw something I couldn't." He stopped again, letting out a breath that trembled with the truth he wasn't ready to say. Her chest tightened, warmth spreading through the fear. "You saved me," she whispered. Again. He gave a faint, breathless laugh, not from humor, but from relief that she was still here, still looking at him with those vulnerable eyes. "I'm not letting anything happen to you," he said quietly, and this time there was no hesitation, no break in his voice, just certainty. The fairy lights shimmered around them, casting gold across the water. She stared at him for a long moment, overwhelmed by the closeness, the sincerity, the strange feeling that fate had pulled them into the same moment on purpose. Her fingers slid fully into his hand, no longer tentative. He squeezed back, firm and warm. And in that connection, born of fear, lifted by hope, the night around them grew softer, like even the sky was listening. He didn't let go of her hand as the fairy's wind wrapped around them. Colder now, more urgent, as if the night itself was pushing them to speak the truth neither had dared to name yet. Her fingers were small in his palm, slightly cold, slightly trembling, but they held on to him with a quiet strength that made his chest tighten. He moved a little closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him against the winter air. She lifted her eyes to the sky again, steady this time, without fear, without needing to be held up. The star that had streaked across moments earlier was gone, but its glow still seemed to echo in her expression. For the first time, she wasn't looking at what she couldn't reach. She was looking at what she had already touched. "Why did you help me?" Her voice was quiet but honest, carrying all the unspoken questions inside her. Not just about the sky, not just about the fall, but about why a man like him, powerful, composed, seemingly untouchable, had knelt beside a girl in a wheelchair and lifted her like she was something worth protecting. He held her gaze, and this time he didn't look away, didn't search for safer words. The wind tousled his hair. The fairy lights caught the seriousness in his face. And something vulnerable flickered there, something real. "Because no one should face the sky alone," he said softly. The words came out rougher than he expected, like they carried a weight he hadn't fully processed until now. Her breath hitched. It wasn't the line of a stranger, it felt like a promise, a belief, something that came from somewhere deeper in him than simple kindness. The deck around them hummed with life, distant footsteps, laughter, the soft rumble of the engine, but none of it broke the delicate stillness hanging between them. He was still kneeling, still holding her hand, still looking at her with a kind of earnestness she wasn't used to receiving. A soft smile touched her lips, shy and bright, the kind that comes from someone who has finally been seen, truly seen. The wind pushed a tear to the corner of her eye, not from pain, not from fear, but from the overwhelming warmth blooming in her chest. She squeezed his hand once gently. "Thank you," she whispered. And the words carried everything she couldn't articulate. Gratitude, hope, connection, the unexpected safety she had felt in his arms above the railing. He nodded but didn't release her hand. "You're welcome," he murmured, his voice low, steady. "And I'm glad I was here." The fairy lights shimmered across the waves as the night cradled them in a soft glow. No more shooting stars, no more scares, just the quiet certainty of two lives that had collided for a reason neither of them needed to question. She smiled at him one last time, a smile that settled something inside him. And in that moment, wind cold, hearts warm, the story closed gently, exactly where destiny had meant it to.